The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, where the city's elite gathered to celebrate unprecedented success. Victor, the company's charismatic CEO, stood at the center of attention, his perfectly tailored navy suit reflecting his status as the rising star of the tech industry. At 35, he had achieved what most people only dreamed of: a billion-dollar company, respect from his peers, and a family legacy he thought was unshakable. His brother Alex, 2 years his junior, approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "To us," Alex said, his warm brown eyes twinkling with pride. "But to the dream we built together." The brothers clinked their glasses, their matching gold cufflinks, gifts from their mother Marjorie on their first successful year, catching the light. Around them, investors and employees mingled, their excited chatter filling the air with an electric energy that spoke of victory and promise. "Mr. Victor," his assistant whispered, touching his elbow gently, "the entertainment has arrived. Would you like me to begin the evening's program?" Victor nodded, watching as the mysterious fortune teller, Sarah, glided through the crowd. She was not what he had expected, no colorful scarves or jingling bracelets. Instead, she wore a simple black dress, her silver hair elegantly styled, her presence both professional and ethereal. She began with the guests, reading palms with a theatrical flair that delighted the crowd. Her predictions were safe, pleasant, promises of business success, romantic encounters, and profitable ventures. The party guests laughed and applauded, treating her readings as sophisticated entertainment. When she reached Victor, something changed. Her warm smile faltered as she took his hand, her fingers trembling slightly against his palm. The playful atmosphere around them shifted, becoming heavy with unspoken tension. "You carry a beautiful success story," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But—" She paused, her eyes growing distant, as if seeing beyond the present moment. "You're living someone else's story." Victor felt his chest tighten, the champagne in his stomach turning sour. "I don't understand," he said, trying to maintain his composed smile. Sarah's grip on his hand tightened, her next words meant for him alone. "Ask your mother about the truth she's carried for so long." Across the room, Marjorie stood talking with board members, her elegant figure draped in a deep purple gown that had always been her signature color. For the first time, Victor noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she held her glass, the way her laugh seemed forced, practiced. The fortune teller released his hand, disappearing into the crowd before he could question her further. The party continued around him, but Victor remained frozen, the world suddenly off-kilter. He watched his mother, the woman who had shaped every aspect of his life, and wondered why she suddenly looked like a stranger. Alex approached again, concern etching his features. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Did you hear what she said?" Victor asked, his voice unusually sharp. "The fortune teller." "Come on, Victor. It's entertainment, nothing more." But Alex wouldn't meet his eyes, and in that moment, Victor felt the first crack in his perfectly constructed world. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Victor played his part, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, discussing future projects, but his mind kept returning to Sarah's words. Each time he looked at Marjorie, he caught her watching him with an expression he'd never seen before: fear. As the last guests departed, Victor found himself alone on the hotel's terrace, the city lights spreading before him like a blanket of stars. The night air carried a chill that matched the growing cold in his chest. Everything he thought he knew, his identity, his family, his very foundation, suddenly felt as fragile as the champagne glasses being cleared away inside. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over his mother's number. But what would he ask? How do you question the truth of your entire existence based on a stranger's words? Behind him, the terrace door opened. I saw your face when she spoke to you, Marjorie said softly. And what did she tell you? Victor turned, studying the woman who had given him everything, or so he had always believed. She told me to ask you about the truth you've been carrying. Marjorie's face paled, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the terrace railing. Some truths, she whispered, are better left in the past. And in those words, Victor heard the confirmation of everything he feared. The celebration that should have marked his greatest triumph had become the night that would unravel everything he thought he knew about himself. The morning after the gala dawned grey and heavy with rain, matching Victor's troubled mind. Sleep had eluded him, Sarah's words echoing through his thoughts like a haunting melody. He sat in his home office, surrounded by the trappings of success that suddenly felt hollow. Awards gathering dust on mahogany shelves, magazine covers featuring his triumphant smile, family photos that now seemed to mock him with their perfect poses. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Victor, the board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Cancel it, he replied, his voice hoarse. And they cancel everything today. Instead of heading to the office, Victor found himself driving through the pouring rain to his childhood home, a sprawling estate where Marjorie still lived alone since his father's passing 5 years ago. The gardens, usually immaculate, looked wild and unkempt in the storm, as if nature itself reflected the chaos in his heart. The housekeeper answered his knock, surprise evident on her face. Mrs. Marjorie is in the conservatory, she said, wringing her hands. She's been there since dawn. Victor found his mother among her prized orchids, still wearing her silk robe, her usually perfect hair disheveled. She didn't turn when he entered, but her shoulders tensed. I knew you would come today. Why didn't you sleep? He asked, noting the untouched tea service beside her. The same reason you didn't, she replied, finally facing him. In the harsh morning light, she looked older, vulnerable, because some secrets become harder to keep once they start to crack. Victor picked up a framed photo from a nearby table, himself at graduation, flanked by his parents and Alex, all beaming with pride. Tell me the truth. All of it. Marjorie's hands shook as she reached for her tea, the porcelain cup rattling against its saucer. Your father never wanted you to know. He said it would destroy everything we built. Father knew. The betrayal cut deeper. Who else? Does Alex know? The silence that followed was answer enough. Victor slammed the photo down, glass cracking beneath his fingers. A thin line of blood appeared on his palm, but he barely noticed the pain. Everyone knew except me. Was my entire life a performance for your amusement? No! Marjorie stood, reaching for him. Everything we did was to protect you, to give you the best life possible. Protect me from what? From whom? Victor's voice rose, echoing through the conservatory. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like nature's accompaniment to his rage. Marjorie sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. From the truth about your mother, my sister, Rachel. The world tilted on its axis. Victor gripped the edge of a table, knuckles white. Your sister. She was 19 when she got pregnant, Marjorie continued, words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. Our parents were devastated. The scandal would have ruined the family name. They gave her a choice, give up the baby or be cut off completely. Victor's mind raced through childhood memories, searching for signs he should have seen. What happened to her? She chose to disappear, to give you a chance at a better life. She made me promise to raise you as my own, to never let you feel unwanted or different. Marjorie pulled a key from her robe pocket. There's a box in my study, hidden behind the books on the third shelf. Everything you want to know is there. Victor found the box exactly where she described, a simple wooden container that held the truth of his existence. Inside, he discovered birth certificates, both original and amended, letters yellowed with age, and photographs he'd never seen before. One photo stopped his breath. A young woman with his eyes, his smile, cradling a newborn. On the back, in faded ink, "My beautiful boy, Victor, may you forgive me someday." His hands trembled as he read the letters, desperate words from a mother forced to choose between her child and her future. The final letter, dated just weeks after his birth, bore tear stains that had long since dried. "Dearest Marjorie, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Please give our son the life I cannot. Tell him I loved him enough to let him go. And someday, when he learns the truth, help him understand that sometimes love means making impossible choices. Forever grateful, Rachel." Victor sat among the scattered papers, his world reconstructing itself around this new reality. The woman he'd called mother all his life was his aunt. His real mother had vanished into the world, carrying the weight of her sacrifice alone. He heard soft footsteps behind him. "I wanted to tell you so many times," Marjorie whispered. "But as the years passed, the right moment never came. You were happy, successful. How could I risk destroying that?" Victor stood, gathering the papers carefully. "You didn't just hide the truth. You stole my choice. My right to know my own story." He turned to face her, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "I need time. Don't try to contact me." As he walked out of his childhood home, the rain had stopped. But the sky remained dark with unspent storms. In his pocket, his phone buzzed repeatedly. Alex, probably wondering why he'd missed the board meeting. But Victor couldn't talk to him now, couldn't face another person who'd been part of this elaborate deception. He drove aimlessly through the city, eventually finding himself back at the hotel where the gala had been held. Sarah stood near the entrance, as if waiting for him. She offered a sad smile as he approached. "You knew," he said. It wasn't a question. "I saw the weight of secrets in Marjorie's eyes last night. Some truths demand to be told. Mr. Victor, the question is, what will you do with yours?" Victor looked down at the box of memories he'd never known were his. "I don't know who I am anymore." "You're exactly who you've always been," Sarah replied. "You just have more of your story to read now." Victor spent 3 days in seclusion at his penthouse, poring over the contents of the wooden box that held his true history. Each photograph, every letter, revealed pieces of a past he'd never known existed. His biological mother, Rachel, smiled at him through faded pictures, a bright-eyed teenager with his same determined expression. Her whole life ahead of her, until one moment changed everything. The doorbell's chime broke his concentration. Through the security monitor, he saw Alex shifting nervously in the hallway, holding a paper bag from their favorite deli, a peace offering. "You can't hide forever," Alex called out, knowing Victor could hear him. "And let me explain." Victor pressed his forehead against the cool door, debating. Finally, he typed in the security code. The door swung open to reveal his brother. No, his cousin, looking as if he hadn't slept in days. "How long have you known?" Victor demanded before Alex could speak. Alex set the bag down on the marble counter. 5 years. I found the papers when we were cleaning out Dad's study after he passed." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I confronted Mom that night. She made me swear not to tell you. And you agreed, just like that." Victor's laugh was bitter. "We built our company on trust, Alex. How could you look me in the eye every day knowing you were part of this lie?" "Because I saw what the truth did to Dad." Alex's voice cracked. He spent 30 years protecting this secret, convinced that revealing it would destroy our family. The guilt ate at him until the end. His last words to me were, "Keep Victor safe." Victor's anger faltered. Safe from what? From feeling like you didn't belong, from questioning every moment of love our family shared. Alex pulled an envelope from his jacket. "There's something else you need to see." Inside was a private investigator's report dated 4 years ago. You tried to find her. I hired someone to track down Rachel. I thought... Alex swallowed hard. I thought you deserved to know your real mother, even if I couldn't tell you the truth yet. Victor's hands trembled as he read the report. Rachel had left the country after giving him up, traveling through Europe before settling in a small coastal town in Spain. She'd never married, never had other children. The investigator had found her teaching art at a local school, her students' drawings covering the walls of her modest apartment. No, she's alive. Victor's voice was barely a whisper. She was, then. Alex hesitated, but she got sick shortly after these photos were taken. Cancer. She passed away 3 years ago. The report slipped from Victor's fingers, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. He sank onto the sofa, grief for a mother he'd never known crashing over him in waves. There's more, Alex said gently, retrieving a small package from the bag he'd brought. She left this for you. The investigator found it among her belongings. She'd been keeping it, hoping someday... The package contained a leather-bound sketchbook on the first page, in elegant script. For my son, Victor, the story I was never brave enough to tell. Page after page revealed his mother's artistic talent, sketches of him as she imagined he might look growing up, based on the few baby photos she'd taken with her. The final drawing showed his current self, clearly drawn from a magazine cover featuring TechVision's success. Beneath it, she'd written, "I've followed your journey from afar, feeling prouder than I had any right to be. Your strength and determination are the gifts I hoped you'd inherit. Your success is the vindication of my choice, though the pain of letting you go never eased." She knew about me, about my life. Victor looked up at Alex, vision blurring. And she never stopped watching over you, in her own way. Alex sat beside him. The investigator said her apartment was filled with articles about you, about our company. She celebrated every one of your achievements, even if she could only do it from a distance. Victor turned to the last page. A sealed envelope was attached, his name written in the same elegant hand. Inside, he found a letter dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Victor, if you're reading this, you've finally learned the truth, and I'm no longer here to answer the questions you must have. I won't ask for forgiveness. Giving you up was both the hardest and the best decision I ever made. Marjorie and Edward could give you everything I couldn't: stability, opportunities, unconditional love. Don't let this truth shake your foundation. The family that raised you loved you completely. Your achievements are your own, built on the strength of your character, not the circumstances of your birth. I've lived a full life, finding purpose in teaching young minds to see beauty in the world. But my greatest masterpiece has always been you, watching you grow into the extraordinary man you've become, even if only through the pages of magazines and newspaper articles. Remember me if you wish, but don't mourn what we never had. Instead, treasure what you do have, a family that chose you, protected you, and loved you as fiercely as I did when I first held you in my arms. With eternal love, Rachel, your first mother." Victor sat in silence, tears falling onto the well-worn pages of the sketchbook. Alex waited, offering the quiet support that had always been his strength. Finally, Victor spoke. Why didn't you tell me when you found out she had passed? Because I couldn't bear to make you grieve for someone you didn't know you'd lost." Alex's voice was thick with emotion. Was I wrong about all of it? Victor closed the sketchbook carefully, running his fingers over its leather cover. "I don't know yet, but sitting here, hating everyone who kept this secret, it won't bring her back. It won't change the past." The setting sun cast long shadows across the penthouse, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. Victor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had witnessed his rise to success, a success his biological mother had celebrated from afar. "What will you do about Mom, about Marjorie?" Alex asked quietly. Victor pressed his palm against the cool glass. "I need time," But maybe I can understand why she carried this burden for so long, why you all did. As darkness fell over the city, two brothers, bound by love, if not blood, sat together, sharing the weight of a truth that had finally found its way into the light. A week after discovering Rachel's sketchbook, Victor found himself walking through the gardens of his childhood home at dawn. The autumn air carried the scent of chrysanthemums, Marjorie's favorite flowers, which she'd planted herself every year despite having a full-time gardener. He found her there, pruning the blooms with trembling hands. She'd lost weight in the past week, her designer clothes hanging loose on her frame. When she saw him, the pruning shears clattered to the ground. "I didn't expect to see you here," she whispered, not meeting his eyes. Victor picked up the fallen shears, studying their worn handles. "These are the same ones Dad gave you for your anniversary, aren't they?" 20 years ago, Marjorie's voice caught. He said, "Every beautiful thing needs careful tending. Like the life you built for me." The words held no anger now, only a quiet sadness. Marjorie sank onto a nearby bench, her composure finally cracking. Rachel was always the artistic one, the dreamer. When she told our parents she was pregnant, they didn't just reject her, they erased her. Every photo, every mention of her name became forbidden. Victor sat beside her, feeling the weight of decades of silence between them. "Alex showed me the sketchbook. She never stopped thinking about me. She sent me letters every year on your birthday," Marjorie confessed. "I kept them all. She wanted to know everything, your first steps, your first words, every achievement. I sent her photos when I could do it secretly." The revelation hit Victor like a physical blow. "You stayed in contact with her. Someone had to let her know her sacrifice wasn't in vain." Marjorie pulled a handkerchief from her pocket, dabbing at her eyes. "When she got sick, she begged me not to tell you. She said learning the truth only to lose her would be too cruel." Victor closed his eyes, remembering the magazine articles and news clippings the investigator had found in Rachel's apartment. "She was proud of me. Incredibly so." Marjorie touched his hand tentatively. "The night before her surgery, the last time we spoke, she told me I'd given you everything she'd hoped for. A loving family, opportunities, strength of character. She said I'd earned the title of mother in every way that mattered. Did Dad ever meet her?" "Once, when you were 10. She came to your school play. You were Peter Pan." A faint smile crossed Marjorie's face. "She sat in the back row, watched the whole performance, then slipped away before anyone could notice. Your father saw her leaving. That night, he cried for hours." Victor remembered that performance, how he'd spotted a woman with dark hair like his own, how she'd seemed to be watching him with such intensity. He'd forgotten about it until now. "I have her eyes," he said softly, "and her spirit." Marjorie squeezed his hand. "That's what scared me most as you grew up, how much of her I could see in you. Your determination, your creativity in business, even the way you furrow your brow when you're deep in thought." The morning sun had risen fully now, casting long shadows across the garden. A gentle breeze scattered fallen petals around their feet. "I want to go to Spain," Victor said suddenly. "To see where she lived, to meet her students, to understand the life she built. I'll help you arrange everything." Marjorie reached into her pocket and withdrew a small key. "There's a safety deposit box at the downtown bank. I've kept everything there, all her letters, photos she sent, even small gifts she'd mailed for your birthdays that I couldn't give you. They're yours now." Victor took the key, its metal warm from being carried close to Marjorie's heart. "And why did you keep it all?" "Because someday I knew you'd need to know how deeply you were loved by both of your mothers." They sat together as the morning grew warmer, surrounded by the flowers Marjorie had tended so carefully, just as she'd tended the delicate balance of truth and love that had shaped their family. "I can't promise things will ever be the same," Victor said finally. "And I don't expect them to be," Marjorie stood, brushing soil from her gardening apron. But perhaps they can be something new, something honest. As Victor walked back through the garden, he paused to look back at Marjorie, who had returned to her pruning. She was humming softly, the same lullaby she'd sung to him as a child, the one he now wondered if Rachel had once sung too. Some truths could shatter a family, but they could also set it free. Victor held the key to the safety deposit box tightly, knowing it would unlock not just memories, but a future where love and truth could finally coexist. 3 months after discovering his true identity, Victor stood on a cliff overlooking the Spanish coastline, the Mediterranean breeze carrying the salt air that Rachel had loved so much. Her small cottage, perched on the edge of the village, remained exactly as she'd left it, an artist's sanctuary filled with canvases, brushes, and the lingering essence of creativity. The local art school had welcomed him like a long-lost son. "She spoke of you often," the director had told him in accented English, leading him through halls adorned with Rachel's paintings. "Though she never said exactly who you were, we could see the pride in her eyes whenever your name appeared in the news." Now, surrounded by her belongings, Victor discovered new dimensions of the mother he'd never known. Her students' thank you cards covered one wall, their words painting a picture of a woman who had channeled her loss into nurturing other dreamers. On her desk, he found a journal, its pages filled with letters she'd never sent, conversations with the son she watched from afar. "Mr. Victor?" He turned to find Sarah, the fortune teller, standing in the doorway. After their last encounter at the hotel, he'd hired her to help him understand the connections that had led to that fateful night at the gala. "You knew about this place," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah stepped into the room, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. "Rachel was my friend. When she learned she was dying, she asked me to watch over you, to choose the right moment to break the silence." "Why that particular night?" "Because you had achieved everything she hoped for you. Your success was secure, your character strong. She wanted you to learn the truth from a position of strength, not weakness." Victor picked up a small clay figure from Rachel's desk, a child's attempt at sculpture. One of her students had captured her likeness, complete with the gentle smile he'd seen in photographs. "Marjorie's flying in tomorrow," he said, carefully rewrapping the sculpture. "We're going to scatter Rachel's ashes together, here on the cliffs she loved so much." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Two mothers, united in their love for you. Rachel would have wanted that." The sound of footsteps on the cottage's stone path drew their attention. Alex appeared, carrying a box of old photographs he'd discovered in the village archives. "You need to see these," he said, spreading the pictures across Rachel's work table. They showed a younger Rachel teaching art to local children, her face radiant with joy. In one photo, she stood before a massive canvas, creating the mural that still adorned the village square. A scene of healing and hope, of broken things made beautiful. "She found her peace here," Sarah observed, teaching others to see beauty in imperfection, just as she had learned to find beauty in her own difficult choice. Victor gathered the photographs carefully. "I'm donating the cottage to the art school. They'll use it as a studio for promising students who can't afford formal training." "She would have loved that," Alex said softly, turning her sanctuary into a place of opportunity for others. As evening approached, Victor walked alone to the village square, studying his mother's mural in the fading light. The central figure, a woman reaching toward a distant star, bore a striking resemblance to Marjorie. He'd never noticed it before, but Rachel had painted her sister into this scene of redemption. His phone buzzed with a message from Marjorie. "Landed safely. Bringing something Rachel wanted you to have." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Victor met Marjorie at the small village airport, struck by how at peace she looked after the long flight. She handed him a small package wrapped in silk. Rachel gave this to me 20 years ago, made me promise to keep it safe until you knew everything. Inside, he found a delicate silver compass, its face worn smooth by years of handling. Engraved on the back were the words, "For my son, who will find his own way home." Together, they drove to the cliffs. Alex and Sarah waited there, along with Rachel's former students and colleagues. As the sun reached its zenith, Victor opened the urn that contained his first mother's ashes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for loving me enough to let me go, and for leaving me breadcrumbs to find my way back to you." Marjorie's hand found his as the ashes scattered on the wind, dancing over the sea Rachel had loved so well. In that moment, Victor felt the weight of secrets finally lift, replaced by the lightness of truth and the warmth of two mothers. Love. Later, as the small gathering shared memories and celebrated Rachel's life, Victor slipped away to the cottage one last time. In the fading light, he placed the compass on her desk, next to the clay sculpture of her smile. "I found my way home, Mom," he said softly. "To both of my homes." The setting sun painted the cottage walls in shades of gold and rose, just as Rachel had captured in her paintings. Outside, the voices of his family, both given and chosen, called him back to the present, to a future where love knew no boundaries and truth had set them all free. 1 year after scattering Rachel's ashes, Victor stood in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, where everything had begun. The space buzzed with a different energy now, not the electric charge of business success, but the warm glow of celebration. Art from Rachel's students covered the walls, their vivid colors bringing life to the elegant space. The art scholarship program, funded by Tech Vision but bearing Rachel's name, had already changed dozens of young lives. Victor watched as talented students from around the world shared their work with potential mentors and collectors, their dreams taking flight, just as his mother had always hoped. "Ah, she would have loved this," Marjorie said, appearing at his side in a dress the same deep purple as the twilight sky. Time and truth had softened the edges of their relationship, transforming it into something more genuine than before. "I found something in the cottage last week," Victor replied, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Inside was a sketch, himself as a baby, held not by Rachel, but by Marjorie. The detail was extraordinary, capturing the tender way Marjorie had always cradled him. "She drew this the day she left," Marjorie whispered, touching the paper gently. "Said it helped her know you would be loved." Alex joined them, champagne glasses in hand. "To family," he said simply, "in all its forms." As they touched glasses, Sarah appeared through the crowd, her silver hair elegantly styled. She no longer read fortunes, having revealed that her true gift was helping people find their way to necessary truths. "Your mother asked me to give you something," she said, presenting Victor with a small package. "She wanted you to open it on this exact day." Inside was a single paintbrush, well used but carefully preserved, and a note in Rachel's flowing script. "With this brush, I painted my dreams of you. Now it's your turn to paint the future, one where truth and love create the most beautiful masterpieces." Victor looked around the ballroom at the faces of his two families now united, the corporate world that had shaped his success and the artistic soul that had quietly guided him from afar. On the central wall hung Rachel's last painting, discovered in her cottage studio, a family tree, its branches bearing both thorns and blossoms, but ultimately growing toward the light. "Sometimes," Sarah said softly, "the greatest gifts come wrapped in painful truths." Marjorie squeezed Victor's hand. "And sometimes," she added, "the most beautiful families are the ones we piece together from broken parts." As the evening drew to a close, Victor raised his glass to address the gathered crowd. "A year ago, I learned that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's built by choices, sustained by love, and sometimes healing comes through revealing hidden truths. He turned to the students displaying their art. And my mother, both my mothers, believed in the power of creation to heal and unite. This night honors their legacy, proving that from life's greatest challenges can come its most precious gifts. The autumn night wrapped around the hotel like a velvet cloak, stars twinkling above the city lights. In the quiet moment before departure, Victor, Marjorie, and Alex stood together on the same terrace where their world had begun to shift 1 year before. "No more secrets," Victor said softly. "No more secrets," they agreed, their words a promise to both the past and future. And somewhere, Victor felt certain Rachel was smiling, knowing that her greatest masterpiece, a family bound by truth and love, had finally been completed. What would you do if a stranger revealed that your entire life was a lie? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional and thought-provoking stories.